We're going to start off by finishing answering a question that was started in yesterday's BloodHound workshop here. So the question that was emailed in was primarily for BlackBird. This question is about adjusting the profit target distance and the stop loss dependent on whether an entry signal is, a quote initial entry signal, right? So we have an initial entry signal, and then after that, there's the possibility of having a continuation trade signal. All right, so with an initial entry signal, we have a wider profit target and stop loss, right? So we can see we got a 40 tick profit target, and the stop loss is based on the SMA 50 there. All right. So, and then, so if that trade is taken out, right, if the stop is hit, then a continuation signal is possible here. Let's see here. Yeah, so a continuation trade, as it's put, is possible afterwards. And so if there is a continuation trade, then the profit target is tightened up to more of a scalping type of situation here, right? So this trader wants an 8-tick profit target and a basic 8-tick stop loss there, all right? So yesterday we had to take the system here, the trade signal rules here, and break them into two separate signals. So in BloodHound, there is an initial entry signal, and then there's a separate continuation signal there, trade signal there as well. All right, and just for good measure, let's take a look at the screenshot here, also to kind of recap what we're doing here. Right, so we can see here, here's the initial signal here. Right, it's basically a moving average crossover, and the Renko bars, need to close below. So this is for a short trade here. So once the moving averages cross here, right, a 50 and a 200, and a bar closes below both moving averages, then that's your initial entry signal. And then if the market comes up and hits that 50 SMA there, right, which is where that initial stop loss is trailing, right? So if it hits that, right, it can take out the trade. And then afterwards, we have follow-up. We have these re-entries or continuation trades, right? And so these signals, these continuation signals here, are to use a tighter profit target and stop loss there. All right. Now, one thing here to note, one important piece of the details here is, let's see if I can find it here. So if the stop loss, right, this is a trailing stop loss, if it's hit before the profit target, right, that is when these continuation trades are to take place there. So unfortunately, BlackBird doesn't keep track of exactly what happened in the last trade, right? BlackBird looks at every trade, it's just a brand new trade there. So there's no way for BlackBird to know whether the last trade had its stop hit or its profit target hit. All right, so not at this point. There's plans on the board, to add a whole nother level of trade by trade management there. That's probably stuff that would be considered like BloodHound version 2. But we're not working on that quite yet here. All right, so for now, Blackbird's, yeah, so for now, these continuation signals, continuation entry signals from BloodHound, Blackbird's going to trade them regardless if the stop is hit or the profit target's hit, right? So Blackbird can't differentiate, or Blackbird can't modify its behavior, right? Blackbird is designed to just trade on every trade signal there. So, all right, so there is that caveat here, but what we will be covering here is the fact that we can set a initial profit target and initial stop loss, right, at these wider distances, and then based on a different trade signal, right? So the different trade signal would be the continuation trade signal from BloodHound. Then, so with this, this other trade signal, we can use that to tell Blackbird, all right, tighten up your profit target and tighten up the stop loss to these shorter ones here. All right, so that's what we're going to do. All right, well, so we would have just had an initial entry signal right here, right? So here's our crossover, and our Renko bars are closing way on the other side there. So that's a bummer. We just missed that. It would have been nice to catch that entry signal, but all right. So now that I got the indicators on the chart, all right, next step here is let's load in those BloodHound signals. All right, so I'm going to load in the BloodHound template file here. So that was yesterday's BloodHound workshop file. So load that in. Then we're going to, so there we go. So we have an initial signal here. And there's that. And then we also want that continuation signal here. So I'm going to load in BloodHound twice. And this time I can just select from the drop-down menu, right? So if you have a BloodHound file already loaded, you can just, use the drop-down menu, select it again, so you don't actually have to go through the open window there to load it again. And now let's load in that continuation signal. All right, so there we go. So now Blackbird will trade off of both the initial signal and the continuation signal there. All right, so now let's set up our order set, and I should pull up the question here. So there we go. Let's see. All right. So I'm just going to use a market entry here. So yeah, the question isn't really about the entry. It's more about adjusting the profit target and stop loss there. So we're going to set up a 40 tick profit target here. All right. So let's open up the initial placement here, and we're just going to adjust that 10 ticks to 40 ticks. Right, so there we go. Type in 40, and there we have it. There's 40 ticks. And next, our stop loss is 8 ticks above the SMA 50. All right, so let's go to our stop loss here. And so we don't have anything from the quick list here. It's close to something like that. So I'm just we'll start with the custom one and just plug in all that information here. So again, go into the initial placement. And since we're using an indicator, the SMA 50, we need to change our mode to indicator value here. All right, and there we go. The SMA is the default indicator here. So we just need to open this up and adjust the period to 50, like so. There. Now, if it's a long trade, right? It's going to be a negative 8 ticks below the SMA 50 here. And so here we go. So for a short trade, right, it's going to be 8 ticks above that SMA 50. Right? All right, so there's our initial settings. Pretty straightforward. So now, how do we get BlackBird to adjust or use, these tighter settings here when it's a continuation trade, right? So let's open up the profit target, and we're going to go into the trailing rules here. Oh, actually, hold on. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Let's wrap up setting up the trailing stop loss here. So all right, so we're going to go into the trailing actions here for the stop loss and put it on custom here. And let's see here. All right, so after 16 ticks of profit, then trail by 2 ticks over the SMA 50. All right, so let's add a trailing roll here. All right, so we're going to trail that SMA 50, plus or minus 2 ticks, at or after 16 ticks of profit there. All right, so let's plug in our 16 ticks of profit here, right? So that this trailing doesn't happen until we have 16 ticks of profit. So let's jump up or go into the trigger here, and let's see. We could use the profit or loss, which actually, yeah, that's fine. Or something that's a little quicker to set up here is the interval, and we can just use this ticks of movement in a profitable direction there and just set this to 16. So, all right, they're both effectively the same there. I'll just go with this easier one there. And now the action is, all right, so once we have our 16 ticks of profit, now we want to start moving our stop loss order to, and again, we're going to set up an indicator here, and we're going to set up our SMA 50 like so. And this time it's going to be only 2 ticks. Only 2 ticks away from, let's see, yeah, 2 ticks there from the SMA 50. All right. And then since this is a trailing stop loss, right, that's following that SMA 50, we need to set the repeat to indefinitely, right? So just like that. All right. Okay, so now we have both the profit target and stop loss set up correctly for the initial signal there. All right, so now let's add the trailing rolls here for the re-entry or the continuation. Add trailing rolls that will tighten up our profit target and stop loss. Okay, so I'll start with the profit target, and there we go. So I'm in the trailing actions tab already. Let's put this on custom, and now we can add a trailing roll. There we go. All right, so when we get this continuation signal, then we're just going to use an 8-tick target there. All right, so the triggering mechanism, right, that changes this to an 8-tick profit target here, that trigger is going to be the BloodHound signal there. So at the bottom there is the BloodHound signal. So we're going to select on the template here, and again we can see, right, there's a drop down menu here, just like when we added the secondary or that continuation entry signal up here in the signals. So same thing here in this trigger component, right? We also have that drop down, so I can just select our BloodHound file there. And now I select the logic template. What logic template are we monitoring for signals? And it's the continuation signals there, right? And so these signals are definitely going to be not in the opposite direction. Sorry, I was expecting the default to say signals in the same direction. So we want, yeah, right, our continuation signals are going to be signals in the same direction, right? There, as the signals up here. So, all right, so that's it, right? So that's how we get this trailing roll, or get BlackBird to monitor whether or not, the trade signal, was a continuation signal or the initial signal, right? So obviously, if it's the initial signal, then this trailing roll never gets activated, right? It never gets triggered, all right? It's only when we get this continuation trade signal does this trailing roll get triggered or activated. So there. All right, now the action is we're going to move our profit target to the entry price plus 8 ticks, just like so. Right? Entry price plus 8 ticks. There. Right? So if you notice, this menu here is the same menu as the one on the options tab for the initial placement, right? This initial placement says entry price plus 40 ticks, right? So our trailing roll is just modifying that entry price, basically, or modifying that initial placement, right? That's all it's doing. So take the entry and now set it to 8 ticks instead, right? So, and this is not a trailing, per se. It's, it's not like a stop loss trailing. So there's no repeat, right? This is a one-time action. Just pull that profit target in to 8 ticks, right? That's a one-time action. So there's no repeat. So this only needs to occur once. All right. So we have the profit target all set up now. And so now let's go into the stop loss here. And so, all right, so we're already in the trailing actions here. And let's see here. Let's add another trailing roll. All right, so we're going to do this. We're going to do the exact same thing that we did for the profit target, right? So our trigger is going to be that BloodHound signal there. All right, and we're going to select our BloodHound file and then select our logic template. So there's our continuation signal. There we go. So this is signal in the opposite direction. We want signal in the same direction. There we go. Signal in the same direction, like so. All right, so there we go. And now the action, we're going to set this menu up the same way that we did our profit target here. So we want to take the entry price and then offset that stop loss by 8 ticks. There we go. And there we have it. Now, some of you might be asking, well, we have 2 trailing rolls here. So how does BloodHound know which one to follow there? Well, actually, it's gonna try and follow both of them, but the one that takes precedence is based on the evaluate, right? So this evaluate using is what determines which trailing roll gets acted upon there. All right, so right, and typically with stop loss trailing, right, you are always pulling your stop loss in closest to price, right? Closest to the market. So BlackBird will evaluate both of these, and it'll see, oh, this trailing rule here is pulling that stop loss in a lot closer to the market, right? So it's going to be executing this one here. So and you know that so once this one's executed there, right, it's done. So there's no repeat. So BlackBird will not try and execute this trailing rule twice, right? It's only going to execute it once when that continuation signal comes in. And then BlackBird's going to evaluate this trailing rule here, but it's always going to see that the action calculates to a much wider stop loss, right? And so BlackBird's not going to move that stop loss back further away to the SMA 50, right? It's going to see that this price, the price that gets calculated here for this trailing rule is much further away than this 8-tick stop loss there. So it'll just ignore this, right? It'll calculate it real quick, but then it'll ignore it because it's not going to move that stop loss further away there. So, all right, and that does it. So let's, well, shoot, we had another opportunity here, but maybe, oh yeah, first thing here is pay attention to what BlackBird is telling you, right? So it's putting a message on the chart here that we need to reload so that BlackBird can get NinjaTrader to load up BloodHound. So we're going to reload our chart. There we go. So there is our, let's see, that's the wrong one. Let's select the initial signals there. Well, actually, we're on continuation signals, so I'm going to show the continuation signals there. So because yeah, this situation is a little bit unusual in that the entry signals had to be split into two here, right? So that way BlackBird knew which signal was which, right? And we can modify the profit target and stop loss here. So under this unique situation here, we can only see one type of entry signal at a time. So we can either look at the initial signal, right? So we just had our moving averages cross. So there's our initial signal. And if we go back here, right, there's that initial short when we first started building the profit target and stop loss there. Or we can look at the continuation signals on the chart there. All right. So if you really wanted to see both of those entry signals, then we could just add another. You could just add a BloodHound to your chart here, right? And then you can have this BloodHound, right, as the indicator showing you one of the entry signals, and then you can have, right, this BlackBird instance of BloodHound showing you the other trade signal. And oh shoot, I didn't have the auto trading enabled there. So all right, let me see if there's any follow-ups here while we're waiting to see if the market might give us another signal. Let's see. All right, good morning, Ron. All right, well, that definitely looks like a 40-tick stop loss, and that looks like it's 8 ticks from the SMA. All right, so let's take a look at this, see what's going on. So I'm just looking through my settings here to see if something wasn't set up correctly. Let's see. Yeah, everything does look correct. Well, all right, so we'll hopefully we'll get another signal here soon. Yeah, looks like we might get another continuation signal here. No, maybe not. Randy is asking, here we go. So Randy has a follow-up question. He's asking, will this work in the optimizer? Everything that has a numeric value will work in the optimizer. So, yeah. So while we're waiting on to see if we're going to get a continuation signal here, right? Because I want to verify that those profit targets and stop losses are pulling into 8 ticks there. So while we're waiting on that, let me open up the optimizer here. And so there we go. So we can see we have the BloodHound template here. And so, yep, so there's the indicators there. And of course, remember, this is a workshop file, so there's multiple systems in here. So let's see, this particular question uses the SMA 50 and 200. The 3 EMAs are from a separate question, right? Separate BloodHound workshop question there. So, right, so there you go. Yep, so you can optimize those 2 there. If we look at the solvers, crossovers don't really have anything optimizable. Let's see, those are, these are all a part of the second question in this workshop file there. As far as this specific question here, just the 2 SMAs, right, those are optimizable, right? And that is, I guess, primarily what people think of when they're optimizing is, changing the indicator settings there, right? Change the indicator period and so forth. And then also, so now going into BlackBird, right? So the 3 main tree elements here, and we should, let's see, hold on. Go back here. All right. Well, there was a bit of a delay there on that entry signal. I think I might need to clear out my database. Let me just take a look here. All right, so you guys are actually going to get a little lesson in debugging your NinjaTrader here. All right, so the time here is 10:30:51. All right. Oh, this makes it difficult. All right, so, yeah. So I have a 10-minute delayed data feed from NinjaTrader. So, yeah, so that was, that was acted upon pretty late. All right, so let me clean out Ninja's database here. I don't think I've done that in quite some time. Right, so if you notice delays in orders being filled or acknowledged by NinjaTrader there, then that is a good indication that your database is getting too large for NinjaTrader. So yeah. So this database here is one of NinjaTrader's Achilles heels. All right, so I'm going to, actually, hold on. I almost wiped all that out. All right, so I'm gonna have to save this. So, because I'm gonna, when you clear out your database, you're gonna lose all your strategies there. Let's see here. Let me save this out. There. All right, so let me save that out. That way I can load it into BlackBird again after we clean out the database. All right, so we're gonna disconnect here. Oh, let's clear that out there. Oh, I wonder if this open position was my problem. Anyways, all right, let's clear that out. Now let's disconnect. All right, now we can go to Tools, Database Management. What the heck? Roll that over. And we're going to go into Reset Database, and we want to clear out those historical orders. So, yeah, when Ninja's database gets too full of these historical orders there, then it really begins to bog NinjaTrader down. So let's reset that. Okay. And all right, and we're gonna restart here. Let's see. All right, so let's get our data feed connected. All right, I think we're good. So now let's go and get BlackBird started up. All right, there's BlackBird, and let's go ahead and load in that file. There we go. And now enable it and click OK. All right, and turn the auto trailing back on, and let's see, let's take a look at our initial signal here. So there we go. So we're in a long state right now, right? The 50 is above the 200. So let's see if we get any continuation signals here. There we go. Okay, there we go. So there we go. We saw those profit target and stop loss tighten up there instantly. So there we go. Well, maybe we'll get another continuation signal so we can watch this again here. I'm not sure whether to start working on Randy's question or wait here. The market keeps teasing me. Looks like it's going to close up, and then it doesn't. So, yeah. All right. Yeah, so let me continue on Randy's question about, is this optimizable? Right, so we covered that. Yeah, here's the two moving averages that are optimizable. As far as the solvers, yeah, there's no, a crossover is a crossover. There's nothing optimizable about a crossover there. Yeah, so none of the solvers for this specific system here would be optimizable. So let's go into the order sets here. So if we open up order set A, we go into the profit target, and so the tick offset, right? So remember the initial tick offset is 40 ticks, so you can optimize that, right? That's optimizable. Let's see here. There's no indicator being used, so that doesn't apply. All right, we do have a trailing roll here, right? So remember this, on the initial signal, it follows the SMA 50, right, minus 8 ticks. So we can go into the trailing rule, and in the action, there is our tick offset there. Right, there's our tick offset there. So we can adjust that 8 tick offset from the SMA 50. So I'm not sure if this SMA 50 is also referring to the indicator used in the trailing roll here. Yeah, I'm not sure. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the profit target. No wonder. Okay, sorry. Yeah, we're looking at the profit target here. So, yeah, so this trailing roll. All right, let me back way up here. So, since we're in the profit target, yeah, this trailing roll, right, is what pulls in that profit target to 8 ticks there. So this tick offset, right, would be the initial placement of 40 ticks, and the one inside the trailing roll is the 8 tick offset there. Right. So, because BloodHound and BlackBird, have such flexibility, right, and there's so many menus, you'll just have to kind of take the time and realize what parts of BlackBird's menu are you in, right? So everything is labeled there. So you will just have to get used to, just kind of slowly reading through this so you can figure out where you're at, right? So this says, so in the trailing rules here, right, we even have the name here, right? So the name of this trailing roll is continuation signal 8 ticks, right? So that tells us, right, that this action is coming from that trailing roll there, that trailing roll name within the trailing rules themselves, right? And again, this is all part of the profit target. So now if we go to the stop loss, right, so this would be our 8 tick offset from the SMA 50 there. I had to think about that for a moment. So there is our SMA 50 here for the stop loss. For the stop loss. So this is the SMA 50, right, for the initial placement. All right, and that's our 8 tick offset from the SMA 50. And then we can now go into the trailing rule for the stop loss. And there we can see here's the SMA 50 trailing rule, and then here is the continuation signal 8 tick trailing rule there. So you can go and dive into each one of these here. Let's see. No, the trigger doesn't have anything optimizable, but if we go into the action, there is our 2 tick. Yeah, right. So when that stop loss is trailing the SMA 50, right, it's a 2 tick. So, but anyways, here's the tick offset. So you can optimize whether you want it to be 2 ticks or 4 ticks or whatever, right? There's that. And here's the SMA 50 for that trailing roll there. And then here's the continuation signal that tightens that stop loss to the 8 tick stop loss. And there's the tick offset there. And so while I was explaining this, there we go. We have an initial entry signal there. Yeah, so we got 40 tick profit target and a stop loss that's 8 ticks off of the SMA. And now it's 2 ticks off the SMA there. And bingo.